Pranakasha livestream.
Hi folks, it's Matt at Pranakasha Productions, and today we are interviewing Lisa Bergman, who is actually a longtime friend of mine and a friend of my mom's, Celia Nix, who was a prominent violin teacher in Seattle, and she still lives in Seattle but doesn't teach anymore because she's now in her 80s. But also along the way, besides being extremely talented pianist, Lisa is an announcer on King FM, classical King FM. And then also there's another radio station that you're part of too as well. Is that true?
Well, it's where I cut my teeth.
Okay.
So maybe that's a great way to start this conversation is when I was in music school as a music major, all I could think about was piano and chamber music. Those were my two loves and still are.
And this was Juilliard, right?
Well, yeah, I started all my musical studies in West Seattle. That's where I grew up on the beach. I lived on the beach in West Seattle.
Alki.
Yeah, right? Yeah, a little south of there, near Lincoln Park.
Okay. And
then I got very lucky. I had a neighborhood teacher who at one point said, I've taught Lisa all I can. She needs to move to a more advanced level. And I found myself at the age of 13 at the University of Washington. Once a week. Yeah, once a week with Neil O'Done. And he made me the pianist I am, really. He was a teacher. I was with him for 10 years. So I graduated from University of Washington with a Bachelor of Music. Then
How old were you?
Let's see. I was 23, matter of fact.
Okay, so you were kind of like, so you were taking like private lessons with Neil O'Done before that, or how did that work?
Yeah, before I was a matriculated student at University of Washington. Yeah, I was a private student.
Okay. That's kind of like how I used to go to the UW, basically to go to the basement and participate in Seattle Youth Symphony rehearsals with Mr. Sokol.
Oh yeah, I was in Youth Symphony. I was in Youth Symphony too. I was in the Youth Symphony from, let's see, 71 to 75.
And in the percussion section?
No, I was actually pianist, and I also played the cello. So there wasn't always a part for me, but when there I was right smack underneath Sokol's nose, you know. He's looking at me like that. I couldn't get away with a thing with Sokol there. So that was a great beginning. Then I went to, after University of Washington, Stony Brook.
Okay.
And got a master's degree there.
Okay.
And then stayed with my teacher from there, who also taught at Juilliard. So I finished up at Juilliard with a second master's degree.
Ooh, you're a double master.
Yeah, double master. Whatever that. So then I came back to Seattle. I really missed the West Coast. I'm just not an East Coast type.
Okay.
I miss the clam beds and the rain and the evergreen trees. Anyway, so I
got lots of that today.
Yep. So I set up shop. I've got a little cabin in Fauntleroy. That's where I lived for the first 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was right about when I met your mother, because I was accompanying everyone and everybody I could think of. I mean, business was great.
Okay.
Then in 88, I was offered a position at the University of Washington, my alma mater, to teach accompanying and run the accompanying program, and also as opera coach.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just for our viewers, and also for me, because I don't totally know this either. So accompanying is obviously much different than being a concert pianist. But like, also, I mean, it's really easy for people to take accompanists for granted because, you get an accompanist and they play along, and you just expect them to instantly be able to play every piece on this recital. And yet, okay, like if it's an advanced recital, half of these pieces are orchestral reductions, which are like impossible to play. And yet we're used to having accompanist like, oh yeah, just have them do that. And then you just have to toss it off, Plus you have to deal with all the irregularities and bad counting and bad rhythm that all these kids have, and you have to somehow stick with them. Like how I mean, do you have to be like a genius to do this? Or how do you do this?
Yeah, you have to be. Yeah, it's like a cross between being a psychiatrist and a mechanic. And actually, there is one aspect to accompanying that is like being a concert pianist because it is, after all, in concert. So when you say concert pianist, I think what you mean is a soloist.
Right.
And
Okay.
my passion is not as a soloist. I've done it, of course. I had to. It's a part of my training. I had to develop chops and be able to do all that.
Well, and of course, like, I mean, you and I played that recital at the Nordic way back when.
Yeah.
And that we worked that up. That was a full blown recital. There was no faking, and that the piano part, from I remember with that, was pretty wicked. And I remember like, well, and I was probably even saying it like, wow, that sounds good. How can you do that?
Well, thank you, Matt. No, it takes a lot of work and a lot of skill. So the work of the accompanist, or the collaborative pianist is a better word for it, divides into two categories. One is works that were written for let's say the solo instrument and the piano. So it's chamber music, really. Chamber
like
music
sonatas.
for two,
pretty
right?
Much, yeah.
Right, and the difficulty level of the piano parts for those sonatas is equal to the other instrument.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's actually more. Like if it's Beethoven or Mozart, the piano part's way harder than the violin part most of the time.
Brahms too.
Yeah.
The other camp is what you were just alluding to, is playing orchestral reductions. And there's a lot of work for the pianist in that regard, because the orchestral reductions are kind of a pipe dream of some music arranger somewhere who tries to put every little piccolo part, every cello part, every trombone part in the same 12 fingers, and it can't be played. So those of us who have made a study of orchestral reductions know exactly what to play and what not to play.
Right.
That's a skill. And that's what I used to teach at the University of Washington.
Ah, that's smart. So, okay, I'm going to just, for everybody who doesn't know exactly, I mean, we just kind of described it, but just in case, an orchestral reduction is where you take an orchestral score that has an entire orchestra in it, and then you boil it down to the essentials of what the orchestral sound is supposed to be, and you try to make it so the piano can imitate that. And then, like Lisa just said, most of the time what they come up with still is impossible to play. And it hasn't been figured out to actually be able to be doable with two hands and 10 fingers.
Yeah, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. You can't play them. So then you learn, what do you play? How do you make those choices? And that is a very refined skill. And too bad there aren't arrangements out there that are playable, and that's going to be in my retirement.
I was going to say, have you ever thought of just creating your own arrangements?
Well, yeah, I have. And I will. I mean, I'll save a whole lot of pianists a whole lot of headaches when I publish these things.
Right.
So.
Okay.
What?
Well, I've written 2 concertos, both of which need piano reductions. And I tried the one for my clarinet concerto, which came out okay, but still. So maybe when the time comes, I'll hit you up and I could hire you to do it for me.
Oh, that would be interesting. Nobody's ever asked me to do that before. I'd love to.
I could be your guinea pig.
Guinea pig, good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I'd love it.
Yeah. Do you use Finale or Sibelius? Do you know how to use those yet?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I could use a hard copy and X and, write and all that. Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay, so there we go. We got a project.
Anyway, so let's see, where were we? Okay, so I worked for, along with being on the faculty at the University of Washington, I was out in the freelance world like crazy, accompanying you, Matt, and countless other young musicians and old musicians. I mean, I was at the height of my performance career, I was logging about 60 performances a year. That's more than one a week in public.
Right.
So that was a wonderful period in my life. That lasted about 20 years. And then I had a little bit of a burnout, and I took the job. I applied and took the job of executive director at the Icicle Creek Center for the Arts in Leavenworth. And I was 50 years old, and that was the first time I had a full-time job in my life. All the rest of the time, I cobbled together countless freelance positions. And I loved it. And I commuted once a week to work there.
Was it in Leavenworth already?
In Leavenworth. And okay. I added it up after, let's see, so about 15 years worth of going back and forth, some 500 trips across the passes.
Wow.
Yeah, I could do it in my sleep. And that was the beginning of the radio thing, because I know you're curious about the radio thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
I'm curious about everything, but
okay. Because the Icicle Creek Center for the Arts is located on, thanks to the largesse of Harriet Bullitt.
Largesse. Vous parlez français, mademoiselle?
Oui.
Magnifique.
As you know,
vous êtes très belle et très intelligente.
Merci, monsieur.
De rien.
So Harriet, being a part of that whole Bullitt dynasty of broadcasting, got an itch when a small radio station, that's what you asked me, is there was another radio station, indeed. She got an itch to get back into radio because Coho Radio, KOHO, 101.1, I just remembered, went up for sale, and she bought it. And it had a limited range in north central Washington, and she wanted to convert it from kind of pop music and sort of junky stuff to mostly news, information, and classical music. Mm-hmm. So the only problem left then was, who would she get to host it? So what do you know? I'm running back and forth, running this music center, loving every minute of it, playing, hiring, learning how to be a boss. I had 5 employees. It was a real learning curve, too, for a music major to suddenly become an executive director. But I learned.
You want to know something funny?
What?
Literally yesterday, I was emailing the current president or head or whatever it is of Icicle Creek.
Phil Lacey?
She plays viola. Yeah, it's not Lacey. It's Kelly Moore. Sound familiar? I think she's brand new.
Well, she's not the head.
Phil
Lacey's the new head.
Then maybe she's like the music director or something like that. She's her pictures on the website, and she says she's running the camp, organizing the thing this year. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to look into that, because I still run a camp there too. So I run an adult piano retreat. Okay.
I also know John Diamond, who also teaches there. I wanted him to play first oboe and my cello concerto, but he couldn't because it conflicts with Icicle Creek.
Maybe you're talking about the summer symphony or the youth symphony or something.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that is it. I think it is the youth symphony. I think it's a summer retreat.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that different?
Yes, that's different. But it's one of the many programs.
Okay.
So anyway, I was very busy and got to know Harriet and running this establishment with $1 million budget and the whole thing. And she bought this radio station, and she came to me and she said, "I want you to be a host on the air." And I said, "Harriet, it's not going to happen. I'm a pianist. I don't know diddly about being a radio announcer." She said, "That's the beauty of it. Just be yourself."
Like this show. Just be yourself.
Be yourself. Because people know a phony, they can spot a phony a mile away. She said, "Just be yourself." Well, behind her back, before I took the job, I went to a radio announcing coach. Okay. There are such people. Right. And I learned some of the basic rules, like never correct yourself on the air. So let's say you make the worst possible gaffe, like you introduce this Beethoven symphony with all the frills and details, and it's just glorious. And then you click play, and out comes a Joplin rag,
or a Prokofiev.
Yeah.
Wow, that predated Prokofiev by 200 years. Imagine that.
Yeah, you just keep going. You don't need to pretend like it never happened, like you intended for it to happen. Anyway, never correct yourself on the air. And you know who are really good at never correcting themselves on the air are weathermen, weather people. Have you noticed that? They make this huge prediction, and it doesn't even come close to happening. They don't come back the next day and say, well,
sorry, folks. I mean, I really messed up on that one.
No. Yeah. So anyway,
that probably works in politics too. Like when you do something stupid, then all you have to do is say, well, we planned that, it was all part of the grand plan.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or you can just say, well, it's all part of God's plan. What can we do?
Well, so Harriet, oh yeah. And I learned to not ever, eat dairy or chocolate. And you're probably wondering why.
Oh no, I ate a piece of cheese about a half hour ago.
Did it clog up? Did you get a lot of gurbles?
But luckily.
Good.
La Croix.
Yeah, La Croix. Well,
if you're at a restaurant and they ask, would you like something to drink? You say, avez-vous de la Croix, monsieur?
So the reason is because it creates phlegm. Big time. And no popcorn. And you get the little popcorn pieces, and you think they're gone and they're not. And then you inhale one 5 minutes later. So
it's not good when you spew them on screen either.
Not a good idea. I learned some tricks from this coach, but Harriet was right. She said just be yourself. So I started on the air as a complete beginner announcer. It was the year 2000. Yeah. The year 2000. And for 10 years, I had that radio job. And every time I drove, I would tape record my broadcast. And then I would put the cassette in the car and listen to it and self-critique myself all the way home.
Just like you probably did on piano, too.
Exactly. And what I learned was every time I thought I was so brilliant, I wasn't. It came out sounding kind of stupid. And the times I was so worried that I sounded stupid, it sounded great. So I learned to not judge myself on the fly.
Great.
Just do it. You know how it is, Matt. Because
don't correct yourself.
Yeah, you can't.
From now on, my name is Mike. Now I'm correcting myself. Darn it. Okay, I re-corrected, so now I'm mad again. Okay.
You can't be correcting yourself on the stage, and doubting yourself, and you can't
go, oops, sorry, folks, I didn't mean to hit that note.
Right.
Please forgive me.
Right. or I played it a lot better yesterday. You can't do that. So anyway,
right.
I had 10 years under my belt. And then I phased out that whole part of my life and was working more and more in Seattle. When, what do you know, if Brian Lowe from King FM didn't call.
Good old Brian, the horn player.
Actually, yeah. Do you know Brian Lowe?
Yeah.
From way back when?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up with King FM. It's been part of my whole life ever since I was like in fourth grade. I've been hearing King FM on the radio. So, and that was okay. We're talking the mid 70s, so that was almost 50 years ago.
Yeah. Think of that. And I grew up with King FM.
And Brian Lowe was on back then, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up with King FM too. I was listening with my dad in the car. This would have been in the 60s, the early 60s. In fact, he was such a King FM.
Early 60s? Wow.
Early 60s. Yeah, I was born in 55. And he would take these long routes home because we lived down on the beach in West Seattle behind a big clay hill. So the reception down at our house was nil. So he would drive home these long routes on top of the hill, listening to the last note of the symphony, and then he'd go go.
So he was a musician too?
Yes, he played the cello as an amateur. My mom was a pianist. My mom was a pianist, and
okay.
I grew up with classical music.
Okay, cool.
It's a
wow. So, other funny thing about Brian Lowe is I taught Suzuki violin at the same school that his sister Rebecca Lowe taught at quite a while ago.
Yes. I'll be darned. It's a small world.
I know. It's
Wow.
really wild.
Wow.
I also have. Were you around when George Shengo was still alive
Oh,
at
yes.
King FM?
Oh, yes.
Because I was actually on his show several times. As I did a lot of recitals with Joel Salzman, who is another pianist in
Oh,
town.
I
And
remember Joel. Yeah.
Joel would do a lot of. He sort of had it in with George Shengo, so he was on the show a lot, and they would do those live broadcasts. And so Joel started bringing me along, and I did several ones live with him too.
Yeah,
So
fantastic. George is still missed.
yeah, that was really tragic. I'm sure you were probably at his funeral, weren't you?
No, I didn't. I was probably in Leavenworth.
Okay, it was a huge event. There were tons of people there.
Yeah.
And there was a King FM DJ that talked about him also, and I forgot the guy's name.
Peter Newman?
No, it wasn't Peter Newman. It was another guy who was he reminds me a little bit of Sean McLean, but he was a bit of a goofball, and I think King FM fired him not too soon after they fired George Shengro. I'm trying to remember who the guy was. He would wear a hat.
I don't remember.
Anyway, he was up there. He was supposed to be giving a eulogy for George Shengo, right, at his funeral, and he started talking about himself for like 10 minutes. And I was like, dude.
Oh, man.
But anyways, that's what I remember. That might not even be true. Maybe that was just my perception, but that was what I remember from it. You know, selective memory.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Well, so that's how I got the two radio stations, KOHO and KING. Ironically, both
start with a K. It's a miracle.
Well,
And wow. Okay. Well, I just want to say I really do enjoy hearing you on King FM because you're like one of my favorite announcers, and I don't know how it can be, but I mean, because everybody on King FM is good. They all have the smooth voice. You know, they're all good at reading the backs of the CD covers or whatever. But some of the announcers, when whatever they say, you just know, well, this person really knows what they're talking about. And when you listen to what they say, you're like, I want to hear what she says, or I want to hear what he says, because he's about to say something that's really interesting, and it's not just reading the CD cover. There's something there, like they went to music school, they studied music history, or they love music so much that they know this tiny little tidbit about this piece that's actually really interesting. So I'll have to give you a bravo for that.
Thank you, man, because I do work hard on those. Before I utter a word, I go through a lot of material to find just what I call the right nugget.
Right, I can tell.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad it's noticeable, because if I don't think it's interesting, you're not going to think it's interesting.
Right.
And frankly, CD covers are boring.
Yeah.
So I have to look elsewhere, and I have a lot of books in my bag of tricks, and also the internet, of course.
We do have Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting. I was also on Sean's show. I'm going to say recently, but I think it was like 4 years ago. And I was surprised that how much he was just kind of winging it. He was basically just kind of winging it with the laptop in front of him. But he was tossing off all this stuff, searching while he's talking, and everything's just all stitched together, totally smooth. I was just like, whoa, this guy's good.
Yeah, he is very good. He's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's definitely the life he was born to live. He's also a pianist too, right?
Yeah. And he invented an instrument.
Okay.
I forgot, it's called a remora or something like that. I mean, he's a Renaissance man. When he first came to Seattle, I remember the Seattle Times wrote about him doing sort of an extreme sport, which was running through the Olympic rainforest with nothing but a headlamp and swim trunks and some kind of those running shoes that are socks with your toes sticking out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know
that kind of thing. That's what he does.
Really? I wish I could hear. Does he ever play on the air, or does he ever do recitals or anything? I would love to hear him actually play the piano.
I've heard him play the piano, but it's very rare. And I've never heard him on the air. He'll do it maybe for a private performance someplace.
Okay, and he's maybe also a composer?
Yes, true? He's also a composer.
Okay, how come we don't hear any of his? Is it like, okay, KMFM has all these little sub channels on the website for all kinds of different stuff, including a lot of new music.
Yeah.
Is there any of his stuff up there?
I don't know. That's a good question. Let's email him and ask him.
Okay, I'm gonna have to.
I'm sure he'd love to communicate with you.
Yeah.
Sean M at king.org.
Oh yeah, I've sent him emails in the past. There was a time when he actually ran the Northwest Focus, and you would have to email him if you wanted to have your concert on the calendar.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure he doesn't do that anymore, right? Somebody else does it for him.
Someone else does it for him, but there is, of course, still Northwest Focus Live.
Right, I've heard it.
It's back on.
Right.
Yeah.
The live stuff is really fun.
Yeah.
It's scary, of course, especially when you're playing an instrument and you're like, if I screw up here, everyone's going to hear it. You know, I can't splice it, you know.
No, but that's the same on the stage. It's the same.
Yeah. But it's different because on the radio, all day long, people are hearing these perfectly engineered, perfectly edited performances where everything's perfect. And then suddenly now you're playing live and there's no hope of ever playing live that perfectly, you know? So it's like, oh, dang it. And then, of course, you just have to cast it to the wind, right? You're like, you know what? Too late. I'm here.
I don't know that people listen with such a razor sharp ear. There's lots going on when they turn on the radio. There's noises in the house. You know, they're distracted with cooking dinner or put the dog out or whatever. Frankly, the audiences that are sitting in a dead quiet concert hall are scarier.
Really? You think so?
Yeah, wow. Because there's no distraction.
Huh. Okay.
It's dead quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's dead quiet. It's dark. They're sitting there. There's nothing else for them to do but listen.
That's true. Okay, that's a different perspective. All right. Of course, that's different too. I mean, well, I'm sort of used to it now because now I'm used like right now we're editing this and then we're both imagining that there's an audience that's interacting with us right now. Right. But really, it's just the two of us and the camera rolling, right?
Right.
So we're both used to this. But I remember when I first played live on the air, it was kind of trippy to just have me and Joel and George Stringro, just the three of us, and that's it, and some microphones, you know, and that's it. And then we were imagining everybody else out there in Radio Land listening to us. But that's a lot different than being in a concert hall where you at least have some connection with the audience and you can see how they're reacting and you can kind of interact with them in a way while you're playing. So
that's
it's a different dynamic. And I know some people, like for me, I kind of get empowered by the audience. Mm-hmm. And I kind of sort of zoom in on the people that are really grooving on it. And they sort of encourage me and like there's kind of an interaction that happens. So I like that. I know, but I know some musicians are terrified by that. And when they get on stage, it's like, you know, it freaks them out. But
no, I agree. In fact, that's why, you know, being alone as I am broadcasting, sometimes I just think, is anybody out there? And then that's when these emails come in and say, oh, I loved it when you said blah, blah, blah. So I think, wow, people really are listening. So like you said, you just get used to it.
Yeah, it's different type of thing.
Yeah, because and you know, I can't get away from the fact that during a really intense part of the day, there could be as many as 300,000 listeners. So I make sure I know what I'm talking about when my lips are flapping.
Yeah, you're doing good. You do great. And also there's the thing about you can't have dead air. So even if you don't have anything intelligent, you got to be saying something blah, blah, blah thing to fill up the space, you know?
Right.
But I mean, I never feel like you're doing that, even though I'm sure you are sometimes. Also, but you also get a lot of time in between pieces, right, to kind of figure out what you're going to do next.
Right. That's exactly right.
And of course, there is the thing about pre-taped stuff, right? That we won't mention.
Well, why not? Sometimes it's necessary due to the logistics or whatever, and there's no difference really. Pre-taped, sure, you could repair a track that you're not happy with, but it still has to come across as being fresh and sincere, whether it's live or pre-recorded. And so, frankly, it's the same.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So like when I'll say you or a typical King FM radio announcer does some pre-taped stuff. I mean, I'm guessing you don't announce a piece and then listen to it for a half hour and then announce the next piece. I'm assuming you just kind of go bam, 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 and, spend an hour and get your whole shift done in a pretty short amount of time. Is that true?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a pretty short amount of time. It takes less time for sure, because yes, I'm not listening to a 41-minute symphony. But sometimes I do listen to shorter pieces because I'm curious. I might not know the piece.
Okay.
So I listen to it and have a great time doing it. So, and I'm very careful if I'm pre-recording and there's a way to do this with the software, is to hear the end of the piece and then do my back announce in the same mood as the piece ended.
Oh, right. Okay.
See, so because you wouldn't want to back announce Claire de Lune,
right,
shouting, and that wasn't that great? So you have to be sensitive to the mood of the music, and the only way to really do that is to hear it. And I'm actually hearing it as I begin to speak. And then the same thing, knowing what's coming, I start to rev up as necessary for the next piece and do the front announce.
Okay. All right. That brings up some new questions. I remember, now this was a while ago, because this was probably the Joel days. They did have some pre-recorded stuff even then happening. But back then it was like on this big reel-to-reel thing. So those days are way gone. It's all digital now, right?
Oh, yeah, all digital. And it has to be. I mean, because you're not going to have an announcer that's down there from 12 midnight to 5 a.m. I mean,
right.
There has to be that capacity.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of thing's been going on for decades.
Oh, yeah. Right. I mean, it was certainly there when I started in 2011. It would be fun to know when the reel-to-reel went out. Yeah. Also,
you hear horror stories about, like, there's certain pop stations where you find out, like, it's all pre-canned, and they got the same announcers on like 20 different stations all across the United States, and it's all, completely commercialized, and there's no personal touch to it at all anymore.
Yeah.
But that's what's great about King FM is okay. So let's go there. So King FM became a public station. And that was how long ago?
It was in 2011, matter of fact.
Wow, that's been a long time. And that was quite a coup. I imagine at the time it was pretty scary to make that transition, right?
Absolutely. But the demand was great. And people just were sick to death of the ads. It's just such an interruption.
Right. Of course, we still have things that are kind of like ads. Yeah, they're like public service announcements and stuff.
But it's just the voice and the words. It's not some kind of horrible jingle.
Oh, that's true.
See, that's the difference. The big difference is you don't hear jingles with $9.99 this week only. It's.
But I love the Soaring Heart Futon guy. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Soaring Heart Futons. And then there's another futon factory across the street, and they make a nice futon too. You don't remember that guy?
No.
I also remember, who else do I remember? Well, there was the Diamond guy. What's his name? Shane Diamond Company.
Oh, yeah.
And he's still around, I think, but he was on King FM a lot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Diamond people, Shane.
Those days are gone. Now, of course, what we have instead of ads every 10 minutes are the fund drives, which are necessary.
Well, you got to do it.
Raising revenue. Got to do it somehow.
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, we're kind of used to that. I mean, there were fund drives way back when with Channel 9. You know, I remember those way back in the 70s. Another thing that I remember way back then is even as a kid, the conference service was happening.
It's still on. I was just listening.
Still doing it.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Of course, it's become sort of a cult following. I mean, like last time I actually went to a conference service, again, maybe 10 years ago. Sheesh. But like it was almost like everybody on Broadway showed up at St. Mark's Cathedral, which is this gigantic cathedral that looks like it's made for people that are 20 feet tall. You know, that proves there were giants on the earth once. Just go to St. Mark's Cathedral. And then people were like, the place was packed and people were like lying down in the pews and everything. And they were all like teenagers and people in their 20s and 30s. They weren't your typical church going crowd at all, as far as I could tell. Yeah. They're all there to hear the conference service.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, such a great space.
It's a bit of history too, and it's a tradition. It's a tradition and something you can count on. There's a certain peace and formality to it that I think is so appealing.
Yeah. Well, plus the music is great. The Gregorian chants.
Oh yeah.
The choirs are great.
And in that space, that beautiful resonance in that space.
Yeah. Plus, you know what? I don't know if you knew this, but my mom's Suzuki school was the house right next to St. Mark's.
I didn't know that.
Literally on the edge of the parking lot is where I took my Suzuki violin lessons from the Nakamuras, Mari Nakamura and Katsutoshi Nakamura, and my mom, back when they were all part of the same Suzuki school, was right there. And when we were kids, we'd go outside and we'd play hide and seek in the bushes right outside. Right in St. Mark's. Yeah.
When did you switch from Suzuki to reading music and a more Western style?
I was about in 8th grade, and that's a funny story because I went from Suzuki to taking lessons from Emanuel Zetlin, who was this pretty legendary violin professor at the UW.
I know.
Really old school. When I got there, I could not play a 3-octave scale to save my life. He put Carl Flesch in front of me and wanted me to play an A major scale, and I was like oh, and I'd never practiced, you know, so I'd come to my lessons totally unprepared all the time, and he would be yelling at me, and my mom would be literally crying at the lesson, and then Mr. Zetlin, and this was right at the end of his life. I mean, I think he died a couple of years later. He was quite old and really grumpy. And his wife actually would come out and she'd say, Emmanuel, please, just have mercy on this poor child.
Oh my God.
And I'd just come out. And finally he dropped me. He called up my mom one night and he says, you know, your son just doesn't have it. I mean, he should play baseball. He shouldn't play violin. I can't teach him anymore.
Oh.
And then my mom found me a new teacher, Mara Devanche. And then I did a little better with her. So I wasn't really that good of a sight reader in mostly through high school until I met Merle McCaig. Do you know who that is?
Yes, an older guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He played violin, viola, cello, and bass.
I met him at one of those adult chamber music camp things. Okay,
yeah.
Merle McCaig. Yeah.
Well, then you probably know Francis Walton too, then.
Yes, I do.
Because this is where I met Merle, was at Francis Walton's camp, the Laya Music Camp.
Okay, the Laya, yeah.
So, yeah, anyways, so he's one of these guys that he died several years ago, but he had like 13 suitcases full of chamber music that he would bring with him to these camps. And he would just grab anyone. He would play chamber music all day long, right?
Right.
And if you walked in the room and they needed somebody to play, he would grab you and say, come on, Nick, sit down. We'll just do one movement. It's okay, you know? And so he got it, and we all got the chamber music bug from him. So I started doing it, and then later I started going to a friend of ours' house, Mary Jane Brockman, at once a week, and just sight reading. And so I just basically jumped in and learned by doing. And after that, I became quite a good sight reader.
Good for you.
And then I could still not practice, but I could, since I was a good sight reader, I could kind of fake my way through any of my lessons.
Yeah.
You know.
I know exactly. I got to be a good sight reader too, because I don't like practicing. I still don't like practicing.
Yep.
No, we got the bit
Yeah.
bug. Wow. So that's how that happened.
Yeah. Though I will say I do practice the cello. Like I actually do practice the cello a couple hours a day. But so that's, I guess maybe that's trying to balance out my karma from never practicing violin my whole life.
By the way, another small world.
Yeah.
Didn't Aloysia Friedman study with Emanuel Zetlin too?
Mm-hmm.
And
just about everybody in town did at some point.
well, I want to put in a plug for Aloysia because I'm on the board of her festival now, the Orcas Island Chamber Music Festival, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this summer.
Okay, new thing.
Yeah.
So, do you happen to remember Rod Magner?
No.
Who flew that biplane called Magic One?
No. Tell me more.
On Orcas Island, he had a biplane ride that he did called Magic One. It was like this, I have a picture in my bathroom, but I don't want to take it off the wall. But anyways, he would give rides in the summers to tourists that come up. But he was really into the Orcas Island Chamber Music Festival, and he was always telling me about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me his name again. I'm writing this down.
Rod Magner.
Okay.
He's retired now, and I think he moved off Orcas.
Okay.
But his biplane was called Magic One.
Okay.
So if you Google Rod Magner Magic One, you should find it. If not, just email me and I'll track it down for you.
I'd love to. Well, speaking of Orcas Island, Aloysia's mother, Lila Storch, the wonderful oboist.
Yep, I know Lila.
Is alive, and she is turning 101 today.
Oh, wow.
101.
Does she live at Bayview?
No, she lives actually up on Orcas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Aloysia and Jackie live with her, and they kind of go back and forth. Martin, her husband, as you know, of many years, died a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So
I took lessons from him also, but just a couple, and then also from Mr. Zygmundi, Dennis Zygmundi.
Yes.
All the crazy violin teachers in town that they all hated each other.
I remember Zygmunt used to say things like, "It must be more beauty."
Yeah.
Oh,
well, you probably knew Peter Erosh too, then.
Very well. I worked by his side because I was opera coach at UW, and he was opera director, opera conductor, really.
I loved him because I was at the UW from 1989 to 1991.
Okay.
And he had the kids in University Symphony were terrified of him. I mean, because he would do things like he would get pissed off, and he's this short guy who looks like Napoleon, right? You know, and he'd be up on the little chair conducting, kind of like, and my most favorite thing that he would do when he's conducting, I gotta go back so you can see, I even have a baton. He'd be going like this, right? Then he would go.
What was that all about?
It worked, whatever it did. I mean, I've never seen any conductor before or since do that. But he would get upset, and he would literally get off the podium and walk back into the woodwind section and yell at the principal clarinet, you know, "Why can't you play that?" And then he'd walk back. And then then the woodwind coaches would call him up and say, "Why are you terrorizing my students? They're afraid to even go to the next rehearsal."
Right. Oh yeah.
And then he would just tell him off right there, you know, because he was from Romania or something. Where was he from?
No, he was from Hungary. He was Hungarian.
Anyway, total tough guy. I mean, he's like, you know,
Oh,
old
I know.
country. So,
Well,
and he'd just chew people out, but then he would turn around and then just say how much he loved you
right.
the next second.
Yeah.
So once you figured that out,
Yeah.
like I figured out that it was all an act, that it was all just the way he is. So he didn't scare me. I actually was quite entertained by it.
Yeah.
And so somehow we created a rapport, and he liked me, and I ended up being concertmaster the second year.
Oh,
We
excellent.
got along great.
Excellent.
So,
because I played the piano for his conducting class.
so
And-
you probably know Johann Lauersheimer then. He was one of his students.
No, I might be.
Okay, he might have been in the. Okay, maybe it was after.
but
So
I
you must
remember-
have seen it all. You probably saw
Oh.
him chew out so many conducting students.
Oh, and I remember, like he would say the guy would finish conducting, and I would play the last chord, and there would be this big silence, and then Eros would look across. He'd say, "Do you know what your problem is?" And the guy standing there shivering, he'd say, "You are an introverted megalomaniac," or something like that. Some such description. Or stop waving your arms like a flag in the wind. It doesn't mean anything. I actually,
oh my God.
I had a little notebook where I put down all of his slam bang.
Oh, okay. You have to publish that.
Well, I can't because my briefcase was stolen one night at UW, and I would give anything to have that notebook back. It's gone.
It's still in your brain. We just need to self-hypnotize you and pull it out of there.
All right.
Okay. Actually, here, just follow my baton here. You're feeling very sleepy. You're going back now. You're starting to hear the words of the
Well, if I tell you, if I really sat in a quiet room, I might be able to come up with a page worth. But he was one in a million.
And he was an excellent pianist.
Oh yeah.
And then he was also one of these very talented pianist conductors who can take an orchestra score, put it up there, and start playing it, and pretty much nail everything that's in it.
Yeah, he could.
And transpose the horn parts, transpose the clarinet parts, trumpet parts, whatever.
In different keys.
Yeah.
There's a horn in F and a
horn
clarinet
E flat.
Yeah.
All that stuff. I can see. Reason why I do take conducting lessons now from Bobby Collins, who, by the way, just conducted Seattle Festival Orchestra last night.
Wow.
And that was my premiere performance as a cellist in a orchestral section.
Good for you.
Yeah, and we did Schubert Great Symphony in C major. You know that one?
I do.
And when I found out what we were doing, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be such a snooze. It's so long and it's so boring. But we did it great. Because the tempos, get this. Most people do it like they go, bum, 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 right?
Right.
He did it. Dum bum 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 bum. It was great.
Yeah.
All the tempos. Once you get the tempos up and you get the light spirit, it was a wonderful piece. I had so much fun, and surprisingly, the cello part was actually quite challenging and way more interesting than I thought it would be.
Good for you.
It was fun.
I'm impressed. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if your audience can appreciate what it must be like to go from a violin to a cello. I mean, everything about it is different. Not just the range.
It's upside down for one thing.
Yeah.
The thing that messes me up the most, which I'm finally getting over, is when you're playing violin and you go like this, the notes get higher, like
right.
When you do on the cello, it's the opposite. It's
I see. Yeah.
And just that thing really messes me up when there's string crossings.
I'll bet.
So, but the thing that's so amazing about the way the human brain works is like, now that I've learned enough cello and I practice, my brain and my body know, okay, now we're playing the cello, now we're playing the violin. Now we're playing the cello, now we're playing the violin. and it just instantly can switch. It's like it's got a whole different set of neurons, and muscle memory and everything. It doesn't get it confused that much anymore, except for what I was just saying about the string crossing. Sometimes that messes me up.
Right.
But all the rest of it, now that I've practiced enough, my brain can keep the two things separate and switch them on and off at will.
That's
It's really pretty amazing.
That is really incredible.
Yeah.
And I wondered too about, because speaking of Aloysia just a minute ago, she can switch back and forth between violin and viola at a moment's notice.
Yeah, that's not nearly as hard, because I can do that too.
Yeah, but there's got to be a challenge there when you're under pressure and you've got to hit that note.
Yeah, but it's a lot more common. There's a lot of people that can play violin and viola simultaneously. And I know violists make a big deal about how different it is from violin, but I don't buy it because it's really not that different as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. It's like the difference between cello and violin is way more.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why there aren't nearly as many people that can play cello and violin.
Right.
It's pretty rare.
Well, way to go.
It's fun though. Well, I'm learning a lot too. The thing is about cello too, like violinists tend to be like this. They're like really high strung and really wigged out, like they've had 10 cups of coffee, and it's partly because you got this really high frequency thing in your ear, and you're trying to figure out how to hold it in a way that makes sense to your body, and it's all like this. But cello, it's low frequencies. You got the C string, and all these overtones are just kind of washing all over you, and just that cellists are just like a totally different breed, as you know. Like Dave, right?
Oh yeah.
Another announcer on King FM. He's also program director now, isn't he? Or
yes, he's chief program content officer, some title like, but it's basically program director. Yes.
CPTO. No, CPCO. Okay.
Something like that. He's a great guy for
He's a wonderful cellist too. I've played some gigs with him over the years.
He's a wonderful guy.
He also, I know on your guys' archive, there is at least the Allemande from the first cello suite that he played.
Aww.
I heard it once.
Aww.
Yeah, I think it's a YouTube video.
Okay.
Anyway, it's in there somewhere. And he also played in Seattle Youth Symphony back in the day.
Yes.
As you know. Did he play when you were in there?
No, we're about 5 years apart in age, so we kind of just barely missed each other.
Well, anyway. I just had a great idea.
What's that?
That might be a cool fundraiser, too. It's to do the King FM Chamber Ensemble or something. We get all the DJs together that are musicians and put a group together and play something, at some event or something like that.
Yeah, that would be very exciting.
Yeah.
It could happen. It's a great idea. I think I'll spread it around. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. That would be neat. I'd go to it.
Okay.
I'd up my contribution. So right. I think I'm paying I'm pretty sure I'm contributing $30 a month.
Oh, you're wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
So I do support King FM.
Thank you.
You're on my list.
That means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any singers in the crowd? Any of the DJs sing?
No, not that I know of. No singers. I don't think there ever have been.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Different part of the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, very interesting. So you said that you have some piano stuff happening right now too, right?
Well, yeah, I'm the director of the adult piano retreat at the Icicle Creek Center for the Arts.
Okay.
That's a lot of fun. It's a 4-day retreat. We do typically 3 a year. And we live, eat, and breathe piano. It's a schedule, a fixed schedule with practicing and master classes and private lessons and free time and special topics and of course social hour. That's when the real stuff happens. And after dinner we watch videos and movies in the big theater there, and it's just a ball.
Cool. Wow, pianists talking to each other. That's an interesting idea.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. 'Cause as you know, we were kind of a funny, solitary bunch, uh,
Yeah.
and competitive as hell. But
Hmm.
no, this is a very different group. It's largely retirees. There's some
Okay.
new people, um, and it used to be mostly women, but more and more men are coming now too.
Okay. So when you do the classes, how many pianos are there? Is it just one, or is there a couple of them?
Oh no, the Icicle Creek campus has eight.
But all in the same, not all in the same room, though, right?
No, so that's how I'm able to do this rotating schedule where people go from room to room to room to room, and we can only have 12 people register ever at once because
Right.
otherwise there's not enough pianos. So
Right.
that's how we do it. And then there's little cabins there, right there on the campus, right in the ponderosa pines with the wildflowers. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Okay. So are you one of the people that actually holds a master class? Do you have a
Mhm.
Lisa Bergman master class?
Yep.
Is one of them on the art of accompanying?
I did accompanying once, and I invited people who had either accompanied or wanted to learn how to accompany. It was a specialized retreat
Okay.
for that topic alone, but usually it's mostly for solo pianists.
Okay. And it's all classical, or do you throw in any jazz or any kind of
It
improv
is.
stuff too?
One out of the three is generally jazz improv, in
Oh, cool.
addition to classical.
Okay. And how good are you as a jazz pianist?
That's the one I don't teach. I'm a very awkward jazz pianist. I can read it, but that's not
Okay.
jazz. You know,
Okay.
that's not jazz.
Yeah, well, it became, well, I'm sure you've heard Oscar Peterson play. I mean, now the jazz pianists are just insanely good.
Oh, I know.
The ones you hear on what used to be called KPLU, it's called KNKX now, but you hear stuff
Right.
like that and you're like, wow, those guys are good.
Oh, they are.
The thing
And
that really impresses me is, and now it's sort of expected that you have to be this good. Um, the guys that can do like an independent bass line, and then do a cool little solo over the top, and they're supposedly just improvising this, which I don't believe. I'm pretty sure they kind of worked it out, because otherwise that would be insanely hard to do, that kind of stuff. And then throwing in, all the jazzy chords and stuff where they're competent, and like the guys that can sit there, do an independent bass line, a solo, plus somehow comp some stuff in between it. I mean, they're super good. They probably practice like 10 hours a day at least,
yeah.
to get that good.
Oh, sure. I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
They have to be able to riff like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like anything. You learn a bag of tricks, right? And then you learn how to put those pieces together. And then you also get inspired and do some brand new stuff, well, at the same time too. And but
there is that aspect too, in a more limited way, to chamber music, where, and you've been there, I'm sure, where you've rehearsed a piece with another person or 2, 3, 4 people, and you expect it to go a certain way, and then somebody does it a little bit differently, and then the next guy catches on to that, and pretty soon the ball is going back and forth in ways that you never expected, and it's very exciting.
yeah, that's fun.
The audience has no idea. They just know that they're excited too.
Yeah.
They don't know why.
Right. That's cool. And also, if you do Baroque music, then there is the element of ornamentation.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, people go farther and farther with it,
Mm-hmm.
including me. I'm like, you know why there are repeats? So that we can ornament and do all kinds of crazy stuff the second time. That's why there's a repeat here. Not to do it twice the same.
That's kind of gutsy. Ornamenting like that is kind of gutsy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I can't quite do it on cello with confidence, but on violin, I can just go to town.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also because I have a church gig. I've been playing at this 8 a.m. mass at St. Francis of Assisi Church, I realized, for like over 30 years now. And it's fun. What I love to do now is when I go down there, I actually used to dread doing the hymns because I'm like, oh God, this is so boring. And it's just not violin music. And I can't hear the words and I'm not singing the words. So it's almost meaningless to me. But then at some point I started thinking, okay, I'm going to start improvising some descants. So now it's super fun because I sit there and just make stuff up and reharmonize it and do stuff over the top, and it's a blast. It's like one of my favorite things to do when I go down there now. So it's
great.
all it can be done.
You're
I got to throw in another thing. So did you play organ at all?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because we were talking about the difference between the violin and the cello.
Okay.
The difference between the organ and the piano, as you can imagine and maybe know, is enormous. It's everything about it. Even just learning that playing the organ, there is a distinct beginning to each note, as there is on the piano, but there's also a distinct end because it doesn't just fade out. It's either there or it's not. Right.
There's no touch sensitivity control over it.
It's the air, and it comes, that and the foot pedals.
Yeah.
Oh, forget it. I mean, I don't know how organists do it.
Plus, they're another insane group because organists are kind of expected to be able to improvise, and in fact, improvise fugues. And I'm like, what? Yeah. When I heard that, I was like, wait a sec, nobody can do that. No, organists do that all the time. I'm like, well, I'm glad that I don't have to do that on a violin.
No. Yeah, they're geniuses.
Yeah. Plus, also, there's the whole deal about figuring out what stops to use.
The stops, yeah. You
all
have
that.
Multitasking. It's incredible.
But then you got the payoff where you get to push your foot on the floor, and then there's this giant pipe about this wide and 50 feet tall that goes
right.
Wow, this is better than an electric guitar. Let me do that again.
And don't forget about the mirror. They also have to watch in the mirror because the guy's coming in and they have to know when to stop. And oh
boy, oh my God. So do you happen to know Bill Clark?
I've heard
a friend of mine.
Yeah,
he's an organist in town, rather notorious. Me and him have been friends for decades too, and he's told me so many stories about how he would battle with the priests. He'd always get himself fired because of it. But he would every week, every mass would be some drama. You could have a show. It would be a great BBC show called like The Organist, and everything that goes on between him and the pastor or the priest, and of course maybe he'd have some affairs on the side and other stuff, just keep it interesting. So, anyways, there was always this thing that would go between. Well, you've done weddings, right?
Oh yeah.
So you kind of know what that's like,
Yes, I do.
There's a lot more than just playing.
Oh.
You got to deal with all the drama that happens at the wedding.
Oh yeah, and lots of times it's complicated by alcohol. You show up stone sober and ready to play, and then the wedding party, half of them have hung over from the rehearsal dinner the night before. And then they don't know anything about how it is to work in a professional situation, and you say, well, here's the song you sent me. Okay, so we'll start just like this, right? And
they're like, can you play it in a different key because that doesn't fit my voice? And you're like, no. Actually, you could probably do it, but and I might be able to fake it on violin, but most string players would say, what do you mean a different key? This is what it says in the paper.
Right. And you're absolutely right. That happens a lot. Or they miss their cue and you have to repeat the thing 75 times waiting for the, Anyway,
well, that's why you always play the Pachelbel canon, because you can just repeat it for ad infinitum and then just stop whenever you want. And everybody loves it. They're like, oh my God, that piece was so beautiful. I love how it does that. And we're like, yeah, most of me, of course, every musician will get this, but if you're not a musician, the Pachelbel canon is the piece that everybody loves to hate.
Right.
If you're a musician, especially if you're a cellist. Because if you're a cellist, you get to play dum, pom, 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 over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until the end.
There's only one piece that competes with the piece you love to hate. is Pomp and Circumstance.
Oh, really?
Well, if you've ever played for a graduation,
Okay. It just got overplayed.
Jeez.
Tom, pa, pa, pom, pa,
You know what? You know who is also an announcer on King FM? We forgot to talk about him. He plays the tuba. He's really good. Seth Tompkins.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, he's a tubist.
I did not. I sent him, by the way, I sent Seth an email and he never responded. So would you be so kind as to chastise him for me?
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, he's fantastic tubist.
Okay, so we got tuba, 2 pianos.
Right.
Plus, doesn't Sean also play guitar?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
I have a feeling he does. Okay, and then we got cello.
And Dave Beck, right?
Yep. And I'm pretty sure oh darn. Shoot. Mike Brooks. Mike Brooks has got to play the theremin. There's no way around it. I'm sure he plays theremin, right?
I don't think so, but you know who does is Brian Lowe.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Brian's into all those experimental instruments. I forgot about that. Okay, so then you've got horn, theremin, trumpet. Mike Brooks just seems like the theremin type of guy, so maybe they could do a theremin duet.
Maybe he can learn. I don't think
because he's like the engineer dude, right?
Yes, brilliant.
It seems like that would be the instrument that he would learn. Is
good point. Yeah.
Great. Edward Algar would be so proud if he heard Pomp and Circumstance on theremin.
Oh man!
Actually, bass theremin, that would be really good.
Good.
Crap. So, well, now we completely derailed everything. Where were we?
Oh. Well, I'm not sure.
Harpsichord. Do you ever play harpsichord?
Yes, and I find it the most irritating instrument, so totally lacking in gratification from a pianist standpoint.
Because again, you don't get any touch. It's either on or off. It's
on or off.
It's plucked or non-plucked. That's it, folks.
And it's twangy.
My wife would love you because she says she hates the harpsichord.
Yeah, I do too. I hate it. I don't mind. I like hearing it if I go to a concert and it's played by someone else, but I don't like playing it.
Yeah. Well, it also doesn't have a sustain pedal. So, I mean, you have to, if you want sustain, you got to keep the fingers down.
Right. And even then,
there's a different way of doing it,
But the decay is so fast, and there's no volume really control, and
yeah, it doesn't have any of the nuance that piano has.
There's a good reason why the piano was invented.
Yeah.
The harpsichord just didn't have it.
Yeah. It's too crinkly. Oh, that brings me, I was going to ask you, we were talking about pieces that people love to hate. Of course, there's the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata that people say they're sick of. But you know what? Personally, I could listen to that piece for 1,000 times in a row and I would still like it. You know? I just love that piece. I think it deserves to have the spot in the repertoire that it has because it's like genius. Mm-hmm. You know?
It's one of the few sonatas that Beethoven actually named. He named Pathetique. The Moonlight and the Hammerklavier, he didn't name those, but he named the Pathetique.
Right. Because I heard that the Moonlight got that nickname because it sounded similar to this other sonata that was also called the Moonlight. They had a similar arpeggiated thing. I think it might have been by Gluck or something. What I heard is Beethoven didn't quite like the nickname because he didn't want to be associated with Gluck or whoever it was that had a similar piece.
I wasn't aware of that story. I just know that it was Ludwig Gesellstab or somebody who named it because it reminded him of the mood of moonlight on Lake Lucerne. And this was after Beethoven died. Yeah, so that was how that happened, as far as I know. Okay.
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, every Beethoven sonata that I listen to, I'm like, wow, this is a great piece. Mm-hmm. So I can't really knock any of them. And then, even like Eine kleine Nachtmusik is another piece that's just played a lot, and it's completely overused in movies. Like every movie that has a string quartet, they always play Eine kleine Nachtmusik, you know. But yet, I think it's a great piece.
Sure it is.
I think it's brilliant.
There's another one of those pieces that makes it into movies all over the place. Is the Buccarini Minuet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All Suzuki violin students know that one.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It's also, but none of them can play it. It's in like the end of book 1, and it's actually quite hard for kids to play.
Uh-huh.
And but I know what you're talking about. The good thing about that one is that it was on the Muppet Show once. And I think they had Floyd, the saxophone player, was there, so they turned it into a jazz version halfway through. It was a really cool skit. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then there's pieces that composers themselves love to hate, like Ravel Bolero.
Right.
But you know what? As much as he wants to slam that piece to say like there's no music in it at all, I mean, if you listen to it, there is a lot of music in it.
Absolutely.
You know, I think his beef with it was that it was intentionally super repetitive. So it's obviously not his usual composing style.
Right.
And so he probably cranked it out pretty fast. But still, I mean, he had so much skill and so much musicianship and so much there that even if he felt like it wasn't trying, what came out was a really cool piece for what it was.
Right, and it's been described maybe by him as the world's longest crescendo. It's just one crescendo. But look, think about how he manufactured that. You know, there's another piece. There's another piece the composer loves to hate is the guy who wrote it, Saint-Saëns, The Carnival of the Animals.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he hated it because he wrote it as sort of a joke.
Okay.
And it took off in popularity, and it made him crazy because it was stealing from his thunder with his other more serious works. But I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, of course, the swan in it is like now, it's like the cello piece besides the opening of the Bach First Suite.
Right.
It's like either you hear that da da dee da dee da dee da da dee, or you hear da dee da dee dum bum bum. Yeah. Saint-Saëns an interesting composer because he always has a sort of a tongue-in-cheek quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a certain thing about it. So it's interesting. I haven't actually heard a single piece by him that I know that I would consider super serious.
I would.
Oh, what was that?
Cello Concerto.
The what?
Cello Concerto.
Okay. I haven't played it yet. But...
That's serious and seriously hard.
Yeah. Yep. Well, there's a seriously hard piece, which is for violin called the Rondo Capriccioso, which is a great gypsy piece. Mm-hmm. But yet it has a certain lighthearted quality to it, so that it's like doesn't have the Sturm und Drang of like a Brahms gypsy piece would have, for example, or even like or maybe even Sarasate or any of those guys. But it's a wonderful piece. I mean, it's beautiful.
I grew up on listening to Jascha Heifetz's recording of that.
Oh,
love that. We had an 8-track tape player that looked sort of like a big basketball. Do you remember the model? It's this round thing. It's about the size of a globe.
You know, it's weird. I grew up in the 70s, but somehow I just was immune to 8-track tapes. I never had one.
Really?
I had cassette tapes and I had LPs, but I never had an 8-track.
Because lots of cars came with 8-track tapes.
Yeah, ours didn't. Yeah, weird.
The problem with the 8-track, though, I don't know, is if you didn't grow up with it, but I'll just never forget. It was impossible to time the movements or the pieces according to how much time there was on each track. So you had to tolerate it moving from one track to the next with this sort of long silence. So go da 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 da, and then it would go da 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 da, like that.
Oh, right in the middle of the piece.
Yes.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was really. But you got used to it. I I still have the dang thing. This
Wow.
globe. I should see how much it sells for on eBay.
Oh, don't do that. Give it to Mike Brooks. He'd probably want it.
Oh, I bet he would.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So, well, oh, geez. Well, we did it again. We're like way past the hour mark.
I can't believe it. Time flies when you're having fun. But
yeah, and then now we're, we could keep going. So now how are we going to wrap it up? So I'll for sure put the link to the King FM down here.
Thank you.
Then is there, so then maybe Icicle Creek too? Should I do that?
Icicle Creek and Orcas Island Chamber Music Festival.
Orcas Island. Okay. So all those links. And then, excuse me. Then maybe you can send me a couple of photographs or something that I can put up above us?
Sure.
Some stuff like that. And,
can do.
That's it. And then, are you guys still in your King FM fund drive?
Yes.
Okay,
we put it on pause because of the invasion of Ukraine.
Oh, okay. Well, that was thoughtful.
Yeah, it was for a few days, but we're back at it now. I think it goes until next Monday.
Okay. Actually, we should talk about that for a sec. So, because we kind of glossed over it, that was a big event because like what was happening at that time is the internet was starting to take over, and radio stations all over the country were like dropping like flies because they weren't getting the advertising that they used to, and they're trying to figure out how to survive. And plus classical music is just not your most marketable type of thing, for the demographic that tends to spend money and that people tend to want to advertise to. So it was already a niche market, right? But then King FM, was it Brian who decided to go public, or who was the one that?
No, it was the then, he was a part of it, but it was the then CEO, Jennifer Ridewood is her name.
Okay, I think I remember that name actually.
She worked hard on that concept along with the board of directors that was formed. Okay. And they just made a leap of faith on this, and it worked.
Yeah, worked great. And so now the great thing, of course, is now that you're publicly funded, you don't have to answer to anybody except for the viewers, or that's not right. The viewers, but the listeners.
Listeners, right.
And so, and the programming is still, the program I think has gotten actually better.
Good.
The program is, King FM has always so interesting. To tell you the truth, King FM is like my whole music education, music history, musicology, all that comes from listening to King FM.
I'm glad to hear. It's the choices, and it's the timing, and the texture changes, and the periods. And then we announcers are very much encouraged to tell stories.
Right. It's very educational.
Yeah.
It's always super interesting. And there's a great mix because we get to hear all the classics, but also we hear classical, like we get to hear on King FM, you get to hear this obscure composer that was around during Beethoven's time that nobody knows about. And then you get to hear it. And I'm like, whoa, that's actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. Or it's like, I can hear the difference in style between this composer and Beethoven or this composer and Mozart. Like, there were other composers besides Mozart and Haydn during this period. Here's one of them.
Right.
And a lot of times you're like, I kind of like it, but I can also see how it's not quite as good. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes they're like, wow, that was actually kind of wild what that composer did. Right. But I would have no chance of ever hearing that if I weren't listening to King FM. The only other way I could do it is if I consciously went on YouTube and tried to find the stuff myself.
Right.
But so that who maintains that tradition of such a wide variety of programming?
We have a fantastic music director. His name is Aaron Stace.
Okay.
And he does all that. And not only does he have a vast repertoire to work from and knows it, but he's also, he has to find just the right combination of pieces to fill each hour, because every hour has 60 minutes, no more, no less. And there's about 12 that's left over for underwriting and for announcing. So he has to find just the right blend of texture, of period, of mood, of piece length. Sometimes it's welcome to program a 42-minute symphony followed by 2 5-minute pieces. or maybe a 1-minute piece and a 6-minute piece. You see what I mean?
Wow, I never thought about the jigsaw puzzle aspect of it.
And listeners are pretty clear. They don't want opera in the morning or trumpets at night. You know,
yeah.
Kind
or
of
you don't want to go to sleep hearing some really avant-garde, super loud,
right,
piece.
And you can't assume that the listeners at 3:00 in the morning are somehow less demanding. They are. I mean, there's a lot of people, and we, now that we stream, we cross all sorts of time zones.
That's true.
So, and the 3 a.m. people quite often write us emails and say, "Thank you. You're my friend in the middle of the night, and I don't know what I'd do without you." That kind of thing.
You saved me.
Yeah.
I tried to sit for meditation. I just couldn't do it. So I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to just listen to King FM.
Yeah.
Call it good. As long as I, sit on my little chair or my pillow, we can count it.
So our music director has his finger on all of that. He's really good at it.
Okay. How long has he been doing it?
Oh, my. Well, he was there when I got there, and he must have been there 10 years before that. I think he's been there over 20 years.
Wow. Okay. Wow. And you guys still have like those giant bookcases full of CDs, or has it all been digitized now?
Much of it's been digitized, especially when we moved from the old Harrison Street to where we are now in the Seattle Opera Building. We had to lessen that load. And now we still have a lot of CDs, physical CDs, but they are without the plastic jewel box, and they are cataloged. It's really well done.
Then if you don't have the jewel box, how can you read the back cover?
Well, we have those too.
Oh, okay.
But they're filed. The jewel box take up too much space.
Oh, the actual plastic.
Yeah.
But you still have the sleeves.
Oh, yeah, we still have the sleeves.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I actually haven't been to your new studio.
Oh.
I gotta come down there, I guess.
Yeah, with the pandemic.
Well, actually, maybe you can help hook me up with this. I was kind of hoping I could somehow work some kind of promo for my cello concerto in, like a Northwest Focus thing or something.
Well,
so
you try. Now, there is still the way to do that, isn't there, on the website where you click on advertise my event or something?
Yeah. Well, I was actually, to tell you the truth, I was thinking of actually buying some advertising time to doing that. Actually buying an ad.
Great.
But also to try to get myself on Northwest Focus somehow. But that's all up to Sean, right?
He and David Dodman.
David Dodman. I don't know
David Dodman.
But I can at least send you an email and say, hey, can you put in a good word for me?
Yeah. Do that, and then I'll give it my best shot.
Okay. That's the best we can do. The rest is up to God, as we say. Oh, boy.
Well, thank you, Matt.
It's so good seeing you again. You're looking great, too.
Thank you.
I haven't done the math. So 1955. So that's 45. Yeah. So that makes you 67?
Yeah, almost. I will be in April. You're
doing great.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
You look great. You still have the same zest and intelligence. That's the thing I really picked up on you. We got to tell this story. So I'm at the gas station, right? And I'm filling up my car with gas. And then what do I do? What do I know? Lisa pulls up and she's like, "Hi, Matt. How have you been?" I'm like, "Oh, good. What are you up to?" Oh, and there was something like, "Well, I'm doing this recital and I need a violinist to play with me." And I'm like, "When's it at?" "Oh, 3 weeks from now, we're at the Nordic. Do you want to play?" And I'm like, "Sure. Okay. Just call my mom and then we'll hook it up." So that's how we ended up playing this recital at the Nordic, because what happened is there was somebody from Sweden, a Swedish violinist was supposed to play, and for some reason she couldn't come. So you needed somebody to sub for her.
And I needed one now. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like so.
Way to go! See, but you had the gumption to say yes. Not everybody would have said yes.
Yeah.
In the circumstances. So
I was young and foolish. I was probably like 25 or something back then.
Yeah, way to go.
I wasn't that old. I remember.
I'm glad you did.
You know what also I remember? We were rehearsing, and it was a pretty involved piece with a lot of double stops and stuff. And you were like, don't you want to tune your violin? And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. Well, she goes, well, your A string's a little flat. I'm like, okay, I'll tune it. But it was a huge success.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was fun.
I'm glad.
Oh boy. So okay, we got to do something. Ian, you have to. How? You know what? I'm working on the Beethoven. No, I can't do that. I already have a pianist. But I don't have anybody to do the Brahms E minor cello sonata, which is really beautiful.
Oh, I know.
And actually, the cello part isn't really that hard. It's not nearly as hard as I thought it would be. And the piano part is beautiful.
It is.
So maybe we could do it somewhere.
Okay, I know it well.
Okay. We got a gig. We got a date.
All right.
Don't tell my wife.
Okay. Don't tell my husband.
I'll say that I'm working with Professor Bergman. Professor Bergman.
Yes. Who could be your mother? Probably. Yeah.
No, because I'm. Wait, how old am I? Okay, I'm 55. So you're no.
Oh,
you would have been 12 when I was born.
No. All right.
Yeah. All right. So that's it.
Thank you.
We better sign off. So good seeing you again.
Good to see you too. Thank you for this.
All right.
Very special. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Pranakasha production. Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life.
For the benefit of all beings everywhere.
We gotta change.